Hello, my name is Arturo Uribe with the Citizens for Nonpartisan Civic Engagement, and welcome to our 2021 Las Cruces Election Candidates Forum. Today we are at the Las Cruces Channel studio, and we will be live on the Las Cruces Channel network. We will be streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We will also be taking questions off of the Las Cruces Facebook channel for all you guys out there that are watching and would like to participate and ask a question of our candidates. The Las Cruces channel studio is a COVID-safe environment. We have this certificate of Safe Sets International. We are practicing all the COVID mandated from the state with sanitizing, wearing our masks in here, and with the plexiglass partition in between our commentators and our candidates. Today we have Pamela Cort and Mr. Henry Young for School Board District 2, and as well as our commentators Derek Pacheco and Kelly Bloomfield. Okay, the candidates will have a minute to introduce themselves, as well as our commentators, and then the candidates will be asked a question of our commentators, where they will have 2 minutes to answer the question. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to go ahead and introduce our candidates and have them introduce themselves. Ms. Pamela?
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Pamela Cort. I am an educator. I have been an educator for 31 years, 26 years of which have been at Las Cruces High School, actually. I spent my entire career here in Las Cruces at Las Cruces High. I started teaching in Albuquerque and taught high school in Albuquerque as well. I have lived in Las Cruces since 1991, but my family, my grandparents and my mother grew up here, and so I spent a lot of my years in Las Cruces. So if you tell me old landmarks, I'll know where they are, like the old TG&Y. I know where that is. I'm very excited to be running for school board today, and thank you so much.
Mr. Young.
My name is Henry Young. I'm 71 years old, still working, and I'm vibrant. So I wanted to be able to help parents and students. That's why I'm running for school board. But a little bit about my background. I am a product of the Las Cruces public school system, having graduated from Las Cruces High School in 1968. I have a background in teaching that came from my mother. She was a teacher many, many years ago in the small town of Lincoln. And she said that the kids would take their knives and try to dig the bullets out of the wall from where Billy the Kid shot 2 deputies. So I have taught quite a bit of my life, but most of it has been either in a private school setting or adult classes. And that's a wrap up on my introduction.
Okay. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our commentators. We'll start with Mrs. Bloomfield.
Hi, I'm Kelly Bloomfield. I'm the mother of 5 children in the Las Cruces Public School District. I have a senior, a sophomore, an 8th grader, a 7th grader, and a 2nd grader. I am the founder of a not-for-profit advocacy group called Families Advocating for Change in Education. I have worked a lot with our school district in advocating for parental voice and making sure that parents have a seat at the table. I also own a small business where we repair agricultural, industrial, and construction equipment called Hammerhead Mechanical, and I'm happy to be here.
Mr. Pacheco.
My name is Derek Pacheco. I'm happy to be here today. Current projects that I'm working on include a community garden project in the Mesquite Historic District that is located right across the street from my grandmother, who just celebrated her 95th birthday this past week. Other projects I'm working on with team members include developing affordable housing units. I think that affordable housing is a huge problem that needs to be addressed, and I'm doing my part to address it.
All right, we're going to go ahead and begin with the questions from our commentators, and if there's any questions that are coming from Facebook Live, I'll go ahead and ask those questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer the question. I will hold up a yellow card when we come to a minute and a half, and a red card just to wrap it up. We'll be lenient with time, but with that, I'd like to go ahead and begin our first question with you, Ms. Cort, coming from Kelly.
Thank you. I'd like to know what role you believe the School Advisory Council should play in contributing to the policy, regulation, and operation of individual schools.
So I believe the School Advisory Council, the SAC Council, is incredibly important because we are then getting input from parents, from teachers, from students, from our entire community, and that's what we need to do to make better schools. I was part of the SAC team at Zia Middle School and at Las Cruces High School, so I had served for a lot of time on the SAC committees. And so you're referring to policy, and so what you can do at the SAC level is you can bring forth those things that you want to do to create policy, and then it goes up through the chain, through the school board and everything else. And I think it's vitally important that we have input from everyone in the community because educating our students is a community effort.
Okay, Mr. Young.
That's a good question. And one thing that I would like to also add and see done is the fact that we could work with the SAC and actually hold school board meetings at various schools throughout the district, where we would have a larger engagement with both students and teachers and parents, and it would make it easier to have their input if we were there with them in their schools. And I think it would be an important step in bringing everything closer together between the school board, the SAC, and the students and teachers.
Okay. Our next question will be coming from Mr. Pacheco. Mr. Pacheco.
Thank you very much. My first question, how can we do a better job of incorporating Indigenous history into our curriculum?
Indigenous history is and has been taught for many years. I know when I was in school, we had a lot of that teaching. We had New Mexico education, which included the conquistadors, the Buffalo Soldiers, many things, and I'm reaching way back to remember that since I got out of high school in the 60s. But that was taught then. I know that over the intervening years, it has been lessened and is much weaker, but culture is important as a subject that is taught equally among all races as far as history in our area. And I think it is very important for the students to know all of that.
Ms. Cort.
Mr. Pacheco, would you repeat the question for me, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. How can we do a better job of incorporating Indigenous history into our curriculum?
I think one of the ways that we can do that is by bringing in Indigenous teachers into the classroom. Then you have firsthand experiences, and those children, those Indigenous children, then will have models to look up to and will better understand their history and their culture. I know in Ruidoso, the Mescalero tribe is bringing back their language, and they're teaching classes to the children in the tribe, and so that none of that is lost. The problem, I think, with Indigenous history is that a lot of that history is lost because other cultures have taken over that history, and so to bring that back, I think we need to encourage more Indigenous people to teach and really bring that into the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Kelly, if you'd like to ask a question of Mr. Young.
Yes. Do you believe that our district should move toward an extended or year-round school model? And if so, why or why not?
I would not really be in favor of year-round schooling. For one thing, I think the teachers need the break to better facilitate their ramping up for the following year, for getting things organized in the classroom, making changes that are needed. If we have year-round schooling, it can be beneficial in some areas, but in other areas, the facilities need some upkeep, so we can do that during the summer break, and students need a break in the summer. I know when I was even in college, I longed for the time that we would get off and have that break in order to just rest for a while. Even in work, we all need a break.
Ms. Cort?
So I am not a big proponent of extending the school day, but having year-round school, I think, has a lot of benefits. There are a lot of models out there that do 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and then 6 weeks in the summer. As an educator who had been in the classroom, there is a lot of remediation that needs to be done at the beginning of the year because a lot of the students have forgotten what they learned and having to go back and do that. If we shorten that time in the summer to a 6-week break, I think the kids will come back energized and ready to go. And if you have 9 weeks on and then 3 weeks off, then there are those nice big breaks, those chunks of breaks in between, which I think will really rejuvenate the children's brains. And I know that a lot of students need to work to support their families, and I would hope as a community we could come together if we did do a year-round school so that we could accommodate those students who need to work to help their families.
All right. And Derek, if you'd like to ask a question of Mrs. Cort.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, how will you use student feedback in making decisions?
Student feedback is vital. As a teacher, you're getting feedback from students constantly in the form of formative assessments, just making sure that everything is going as it should and that everyone is understanding. And if you have one student in the classroom who is not understanding, that means you've got multiple students in the classroom who aren't understanding. I used to do 3 questions at the end of class, and they can just write it down anonymously. What do you need me to do? What do you need for me to stop doing? And what should I continue to do? And that was valuable feedback for me. And so we have our student advisor who is on the board with us, and having that feedback from the students is so valuable. I think actually we should have more students on our school board advisory council. I think that would be perfect. And they come in for the SAC and the DAC meetings, but those are a little bit more parent-centric, so I bring more kids into the SAC meetings and the DAC meetings and maybe get a couple of more students on the school board up there on the dais with us. It'd be awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Young.
Let me give you an example that I witnessed. Many times the school board members are not in constant communication with the students. We can always do more to increase that. And I saw the student member of the board actually bring up a subject concerning the crosswalk lights at Las Cruces High School. And apparently most of the board was not aware of that there were problems. Therefore, this was something that was addressed there at the meeting. And I haven't heard about the follow-up, but I assume something has been done. So it's important that the students have a voice. Let's face it, our government is built on the fact that the populace is to be involved in government. In fact, we are the government. In the republic, the people are the governing force that elect representatives to legislate, and then the three branches divide the power. But as a people, we are the ones that are supposed to have the interest in all governmental actions, and it's needed in schools. The students need to have a say in what is going on in the schools.
Okay. Kelly, if you would like to ask Mr. Young a question.
Okay. The latest round of federal pandemic relief funding totals for our district come to about $64 million. Specifically, what do you believe should be the district's highest 2 or 3 priorities for that funding?
Very good question. It depends on how it comes down from the state to the individual school boards, first of all. Then, or not to the school boards, but to the school districts. Then at that point, I would like to see the money go directly to the classroom rather than being spread out over the payroll of the entire district. What I'm saying is, I think that at this point, when we have a lot of problems and teachers need the money, that we ought to focus on giving the money to the teachers rather than admin increases. We may have another question that I'll address something else at a later time, but I would like to see that money go into the classroom and dedicated to the students to broaden what we can offer as far as maybe the remedial catch-up as well as learning at grade level right now.
Ms. Cort?
So the COVID money that's coming in it's designated to go to certain places. We don't have full autonomy over that money because it's money given to us by the government for specific instruction, for specific things to do. So definitely I want to see that money put forth so that we create safer environments for our children in school, because we want to keep our children in-person learning for the entire year. We certainly don't want to go back to where we were last year. So updating the HVAC systems, making sure that there is PPE for all of the students and the staff, and I'm trying to think of what else is in there. So I wish we had more autonomy over where that money would go, and I think that if we can, within those COVID safety measures, I would root for smaller class sizes so that we can separate the children, so that the teachers can give, and the educators, everyone in the building can give those students more one-on-one time so that they can achieve at a better rate. A lot of it goes towards technology as well, and we do have some outdated technology that we are updating, and the money is going to go there as well. But I would also like for it to go down into the classroom as much as it can, as much as we're allowed to have it happen. And in that case, I would really like to have the smaller class sizes for that.
All right. And Mr. Pacheco, if you would like to ask Ms. Cort a question.
Absolutely. How many guidance counselors do we currently have per student? And do you believe that we need to set aside more funding for guidance counselors?
So at the high school level, I can tell you they have a caseload of probably 300 students per guidance counselor, which is way too heavy a load to make sure that those students are receiving the services that they have. We do have student-based health centers in several of our schools. I wish they were in all of our schools that can help offset some of those counseling duties. But yes, I believe that there should be more counselors in the school, especially because we're dealing in this time with COVID trauma, and we're having COVID trauma with the educators in the building as well as the students. And sometimes it's a lot. It's almost too much. And the guidance counselors are bogged down with just their guidance counselor duties, and I know that they spend so much time and they sit and they talk to those kids and make sure that everybody is okay. But it would certainly be helpful if there were more guidance counselors. That was a great question.
Thank you.
Mr. Young?
That is a good question. I think overall, every position as far as teachers, counselors, with the exception of top-level admin, there are too few people that are actually doing those jobs. So we should have a more equitable amount of students per guidance counselor, but let's face it, there's a shortage on everything. We have a shortage in every industry right now, whether it's restaurants, many businesses can't get enough people to work. And it's the same within the school system, hence the bonus offer for more teachers to come on board. And something should be done, or maybe can be done, to even increase the number of counselors for each of those schools that need them. Guidance counselors, I don't think have to start in high school. I think we can start preparing in mid-high, and in some ways even pointing toward all of that in elementary schools. So maybe by starting earlier, it would help along the way to mitigate some of the problems that occur. I know many students don't even think about what they're going to do until the senior year. Well, by then, it's almost too late to start preparing for college or a trade. Some students don't even need to worry about college because they have a trade in mind. And we need to even prepare for that in advance. That's where a guidance counselor can come in to that arena and give them some pointers.
All right, thank you. Kelly, if you'd like to ask Mr. Young a question.
Yes. We are a huge school district, and every single one of those 24,000 and some odd kids are just as important as the next kid. What do you think our district could do better to address the individual needs of those children in a district as large as ours is? I ask this because so many children are being lost. I have one of them. He has a dual parent home with a reasonable income. He is still lost. If my child is having the struggles he's having with all of the support that he has, what's happening for the children that don't have that support? What can we do better to address their needs?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that I think has been around since schooling began. But there are many children that have special needs, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's learning disabilities, many factors that come into play. I know of one student who cannot perform in the classroom setting, but did excellent work online. And I think if that is the case, we need to assess on a case-by-case situation, deal with those students individually, form a case study on them, and then attempt to address the needs of each individual student. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So there again, we may have to ramp up the areas to produce those individual case-by-case studies to help the students. It's going to be difficult, but it needs to be addressed, and we could get on it as soon as even this year. And I think that's a responsibility that the school board people who are elected should address almost immediately.
All right, Ms. Cort?
That is an excellent question, and it is an issue. And as a teacher, if I saw a student who was falling through the cracks, it would break my heart. And we would bring them in and figure out something to do with them, but that doesn't happen all the time. So going back to smaller class sizes, I really think that that is a very viable option, because then the teacher creates those connections with all of the students, When you have 30, 35 kids in a class, it's really rough to do that in that short amount of time where you have them. We do have something that's called advisory, and that's done at the middle school and the high school level. And that was set up so that students could have their person, their adult in the building, who could care for them and make sure that they are getting everything that they need. But once again, if you have an advisory class with 35 kids and doing all the research that you need to do, making sure that they are attending school and understanding everything in the classroom and making sure that's all right, it's a big task. It's a very big task. So once again, going back to the smaller class sizes, and that comes with funding. And so I would work with the state, on the state level, to get that money so that we can take it down to the teachers and to the classrooms where it's needed. And we can get, right now we're in an educator crisis. So I even think that if we can bring parents into the classroom, having them help. I used to help all the time in elementary school, but just bringing our community in and doing the community schools and bringing all of that together, we can really work on saving those kids who kind of fall through the cracks.
You answered the question, okay.
Yes.
I had a question too, just because of the climate and what we're seeing on television and the news. You're sitting there seeing a lot of parents and people that are going to the school board meetings, about masks. So when you guys watch that, where do you guys stand on the whole masks for students in this classroom? Ms. Cort?
Okay, I am very proud of what Las Cruces Public Schools is currently doing. I think that we need to take every safety precaution to make sure that our students are safe. So we are following the guidelines by the CDC, which CDC is run by professionals. They are knowledgeable, they are scientists, they know what's going on, and so following the CDC guidance is very important. We're also following guidance from the toolkit from the New Mexico Public Education Department. I think that we're doing everything that we can do, given the amount of kids that we have, to make sure everybody's safe, and part of that is masking.
Okay. Mr. Young?
I have a slightly different take on that, in the fact that, yes, COVID is a reality, but we do know that it does not affect children as much as it does adults. I mean, the figures are there. That's all I heard in the beginning was trust the science. The science shows that it is not as problematic for children as it is adults. And the other fact is that there are many students that we have talked to that have really indicated that it is detrimental to their breathing, that especially when they are out on the playground. And by the way, the mandates of the CDC, or the regulations and guidelines that they set forth, are not as strict as those that have come out of New Mexico Health Department and the governor. And they are much stricter, and I think in many cases they are hurting our children as far as long-term health, simply because rebreathing some of that air, especially after physical activity, can be very detrimental to health.
Okay. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We'll come back for the second part of our forum here with our candidates. Remember, if you're out in watching this streamed right now on Facebook Live on the Las Cruces channel, you have an opportunity to ask a question. Feel free to go ahead and type it in. If it's a question, we'll go ahead and ask it of the candidates. With that, we'd just like to say thank you, and we'll be right back with you in just about 3 minutes. Hello, welcome back. My name is Arturo Uribe with the Citizens for Nonpartisan Civic Engagement, and welcome to our Las Cruces Election Candidates Forum with school board candidates Henry Young and Pamela Cort. We've had some questions coming back from our commentators, Mrs. Bloomfield and Mr. Pacheco, and we are starting to see some questions come off of Facebook Live on the Las Cruces channel. So feel free to go ahead and ask some questions from on the Facebook channel. With that, I'd like to take a question that we actually got off of Facebook from one of the folks out there, a Leanne K. Leanne K is asking, and this question will be for you, Mrs. Cort, for both of you, but start with you, Ms. Cort. How can we support the student on an IEP without forcing them to take an advisory class?
That's an interesting question, because advisory class is, I believe that it's part of the curriculum, and all students have an advisory teacher and an advisory class. Supporting the IEP, and this is through state law, that all of those modifications have to go to all of the teachers. All of the teachers know what kind of modifications need to happen for that student. And then they have a special education facilitator who makes sure that all of those things happen for the student. So really, the advisory class really doesn't have much to do with that. More the SPED facilitator will take care of that student and make sure. And if the parent notices that possibly a teacher isn't doing something that's part of their modifications, they contact the teacher and make sure that things are taken care of. Communication is key, and so a lot of times, as an educator, if we don't know if there are certain things that need to happen for that child, having the parent reach out even before school starts and says, here's what needs to happen, can you make this happen for my child? We always say yes, because of course we're there for the kids.
Yes. Mr. Young.
That was a good answer. We can, for the most part, once you have the casework built up, you've got your foundation upon which to act, and basically from there it's the follow-up and the way that we handle the needs of the individual students. And that's there again, to me, that's the most important part, is that you have the one-on-one individual contact, which is so important not only for students, but in my daily work with the mission and the people with whom I work. It is important. You have rules and regulations, but you still have to deal with situations on a personal level. And I think sometimes we, in my line of work as well as in the school system, get out of the personal touch and sometimes try to fix it with the big picture and the overall rules and regulations. And that's where some of those students fall through the cracks, is because even though the foundation is laid, many times the follow-through doesn't get done. And a lot of that, there again, it goes back to the shortage in the people that are there to actually address the individual problems and work with the students one-on-one. And that is something that is hard to do no matter where you are, but it needs to be addressed more fully.
Okay. Mrs. Bloomfield, if you'd like to ask Mr. Young a question, please.
Sure. Whether we like it or not, we've had some school board meetings lately that have been very charged. And while they have been very charged, they have brought more people out and caused people to be more invigorated and interested in what's going on in the district. How, as a school board member, can you encourage the public to continue to be involved in a respectful manner, which we're not always seeing lately, but not only the people that feel strongly on one side of an issue, but how do we get more people with different views to feel that their voices are going to be heard so that they aren't wasting their time coming to a school board meeting, speaking their mind, and then the school board just dismissing what they have to say.
Thank you for that question. One of the first things, and I've mentioned this earlier, I think getting into the actual schools within our district, and, well, of course, all 5 districts, in which we would hold the meeting in one district each, for each meeting. And by doing that, we are showing the public that we are interested in those students and those parents. And the other thing that I would do is encourage the president of the school board to revamp the way that the meeting is run. Now, I know there are guidelines for doing it, but there needs to be equal engagement. And one of the ways that I would do that, if the school board members are allowed, have no time limit on their comments, then the public should not have a time limit. And with time limits also, it should be equally dispersed on pro and con on any subject. And that would have to be predetermined so that you would have equality even in the participation portion by the public. That, to me, would make everything much plainer, and it could be talked out in a better way. So thank you for that question.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Pacheco, if you would like to ask Mrs.
Do you want me to ask?
Oh,
the same
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
She didn't get her turn.
No
Okay.
worries, no worries. And so let me have you repeat that one more time, and that way we're all clear.
How can we make sure, to be succinct, that we get more involvement from the public, not just when there's a big charged issue, but just in the regular times? And how can we make sure that those that don't feel like their voices would be heard, so they don't come, have the opportunity to come and be heard and be represented?
Thank you. So I think increased communication is the way to do that. So we are reinstating the School Advisory Council and the District Advisory Council where there is more parent input. I think as school board members and central office administration, we need to announce when the school board meetings are. There is a calendar online, but I don't know how many people go on there and actually look and see when the meetings are. So if we can get the word out that the school board meetings are happening at such and such a time here on it's the first and third Tuesdays of every month at 6 p.m. for the school board meetings and 4 p.m. for the work sessions, that we can get more people to come in. I think a lot of it, some hesitancy comes too with people who aren't comfortable. And so we have welcome centers in our high schools and our middle schools where they are basically parent centers, and we offer classes to the parents, and it's a place where parents can come in and feel comfortable. We have them, yes, at the middle school and the high school, but we don't have them yet at the elementary school, and I'd like to expand them to the elementary schools because there is an intimidation factor, I think, when parents think that they need to come in and advocate for their student, but they're not sure how, or there's a language barrier or whatever. Those welcome centers take care of that. And the community schools are also taking care of that as well, because then we're pulling together as a community and parents are feeling comfortable with what's happening in the school and they know what's going on. So the increased communication, more community schools, and just the public input. As a school board member, we aren't allowed to say anything back. So it looks like we're not doing anything, but we can't say anything back to you. So our hands are a little bit tied right there.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pacheco, if you would like to ask a question now of Mrs. Cort.
Yes, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but if you want to get more specific, I'm wondering, are you concerned with student fatigue related to COVID-19 and the low school spirit of these traumatized young adults? Additionally, how would you use your budgeting and policy-making powers to address the needs of our kids coming out of this pandemic?
That's a really great question. What I've heard from many of my teacher friends is that students are coming into school not academically, but behaviorally, about 2 years behind. So if you have a 6th grade class, they're acting like 4th graders. If you have a 9th grade class, they're acting like 7th graders. And so they have had 18 months of being able to take a nap during the day or multitask on their phone and do a bunch of things, and bringing that back is just a slow process that involves a lot of patience on the part of the educators and the students. And I really believe that we need to create community first in our classrooms before we can start dealing with heavy-duty curriculum. And I know that that gets, some people aren't happy with that because they're like, the academics need to happen. And they do, but if a student's basic needs aren't taken care of, if you look at Maslow's pyramid, if a student doesn't feel safe, if a student is hungry, if a student is tired, there is no way that you are going to deliver any curriculum. So I would work on just building that community within the school before we started moving in with academics. And I feel like I talked around your question a little bit. Do you want me to be more specific?
No, that was
Can I do that?
That was a great answer. You may elaborate if you like, if the moderator says.
Okay,
30 seconds.
I think I've covered it. So thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Just making sure that our students feel safe. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, and we got a question now coming off of Facebook. Oh,
Sorry.
I keep forgetting to allow you guys to answer the questions. Sorry about that. I treat you guys equally.
Okay. COVID has messed up the lives of everyone worldwide. We need to kind of step back, take a deep breath, and figure out how to approach every situation that comes up that has been produced by COVID. The first thing that comes to my mind, over and above what Pam has already stated, is that we need to, first of all, take care of their problems. As I've already mentioned, I'll equate it to my work at the mission. We saw people, the first thing that they were concerned about was safety. Even before COVID, safety was important because of things that have happened in their lives. The same with the children in classrooms. And it's even bigger now because many of them have been able to do things, as she said, acting 2 grade levels behind and not being willing to come back into the classroom. We probably have fewer that are attending classes every day, and they have to get back into the idea of, I need to go to class. It's important in order to do what I need to do. And that is yet to become a reality in their lives, that they have to now start performing. Many of them say, it's too big a hurdle, I can't catch up. It's a mindset, and we have to do it in a way that they can realize what they're doing. It's like eating an elephant. You take one bite at a time.
An elephant. Okay. Never had an elephant burger. We're going to go ahead. We'll take another question here from Facebook. And then what I'll go ahead and do is I'll allow each of you to ask a question of each other. And then I'm going to ask my commentators, was there anything that you felt that you wanted them to elaborate on any of the questions you had, or do you have a really pressing question, either one of you?
I believe I was able to ask one more question than Mr. Pacheco, so I want to defer to him. I do have one follow-up question if there is time, but
Okay.
I want to defer to Mr. Pacheco first.
Okay. Is that okay with you?
Yes, actually, it was surprising that Kelly and I drafted 2 or 3 similar questions, so that tells me we're all kind of on the same page here as far as our concerns. I don't personally need any more elaboration. I was hoping to go into a little bit more detail as far as specific policy that you might be thinking of addressing these problems with, but your answers were very good and informative, and I'm okay with that. As far as additional questions, I think we should take some more from Facebook.
Yep. So I have a question here, and there's actually been asked of me twice already. Mr. Ramon Cisneros is asking which candidate supports the JBC policy here in Las Cruces, and what is your take on the JBC policy, equity and excellence? And Mr. Young?
Yes, that is the name of the policy, equity and excellence. Let me explain something for everyone out there. The policy has passed. It is in place. Unless it is brought back up before the school board for revision or to be eliminated, nothing can be done. The policy is there. Now, here is the meat of the situation. Policy is like building a house, and you set up the framework first. That is what policy is. The follow-through and the finishing of the house is to do the finish work, put the outside on, stucco, put the roof on, make it look good on the outside and the inside. That's where the curriculum comes in. The curriculum is not yet into the classroom, and that's where the parents and the citizens of Las Cruces need to be involved, is in actually be involved in the guidelines of the curriculum formulation and the curriculum itself, as far as what is there, what needs to be changed, and the parents and citizens need to speak up and address the situation so that it can be put in the classroom in the proper manner. Personally, and I'll answer the question, I do not like JBC.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Cort.
JBC became a policy because of a lawsuit and because the findings of the people who were doing the research indicated that we were not addressing the needs of the multiple cultures and languages that we have in our classroom. And so because of this, it's gotten convoluted, but what we are doing in the classroom is we are doing culturally and linguistically responsive teaching. And what that means is that every voice is heard and validated in the classroom. So that if you, say for example, you're teaching English and you are talking about roots and suffixes and prefixes, you can talk about that in the other languages and you can ask the children in the classroom. So in Spanish or in French or in Farsi, do you have the same things, and make those connections? And when those students realize that their culture and their language is validated, then it creates a connection to their education, and then we have students who perform so much better because they've made that connection, they feel part of the educational process. And what's happened in the past is that we have ignored those voices. And when we talked about Indigenous teachers coming into the classroom to create those connections, the same thing with other cultures and other languages, bringing those teachers of color into the classroom so that we can create those connections, I feel is vitally important. It's not critical race theory, it's culturally and linguistically responsive teaching, and I am very much for JBC.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and Mrs. Cort, if you'd like to take this opportunity to go ahead and ask Mr. Young a question of him, and then he will have a question to ask of you. I just ask that you keep your question to 30 seconds.
Okay. So Henry, one of the first resolutions I made on the school board was to allow for activity buses for students so that a bus would leave later on in the day so that all students had the opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities. If you are on the school board, what would be the first resolution that you would make?
You know, I haven't even considered that, to be quite frank.
No worries.
But I think that what we need to do in that area would be to ease some of the tension that we see now among the students, and to have more or a built-in fun day activity where the whole school could participate and relieve some of the tension as far as COVID, still have the safe practices, but allow something outside the regular curriculum just to invigorate the community by having a special event.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. And Mr. Young, you have an opportunity to ask Mrs. Cort a question.
Well, I had another one in mind, but now that JBC came up, I want to ask you one thing.
Sure.
The idea that Yazi Martinez is what prompted all of JBC, to me, is a false thing. Yazi Martinez was on a pueblo, or not a pueblo, it was in the Navajo Nation, and it didn't even address anything that has to do with JBC. It was the fact that they couldn't get equal opportunity due to the fact that there was no way to get distance learning to them, or even equal opportunities in doing that. So how would you address that?
So I think that we have addressed it in some ways, but we need to expand it. So there are areas, and not just tribal areas, where there is no infrastructure, where the students cannot get the internet, where they can't learn online because there is just no structure there. Las Cruces Public Schools currently is expanding their virtual learning academy to smaller communities around where they don't have the infrastructure, and we are hooking up the internet and the Wi-Fi, and I don't know all the technology, but it's super cool, so that students who don't have that opportunity can now plug into Las Cruces Public Schools and get all of that stuff, which is totally amazing. And so when we're looking at the Yazi Martinez lawsuit, that part of that is building that infrastructure in our state. We have a very rural state. There are a lot of places that have specific needs, and I think one of the ways is putting in the technological infrastructure, and another way is creating community schools within all of those districts, so that the community can say, these are our needs, this is what we need to do, and then everybody comes together and uses the school as the focal point to make it happen.
Right on. Well, thank you very much. I want to say thank you both for coming. This was our first one for this election cycle in Las Cruces for the school board, and I really appreciate you guys coming and answering our questions and sitting with us. You know, COVID has really put a strain not only on our schools, our children, our communities. We've also had to change in the way we engage with our candidates. I don't know if you guys are going door to door, or if you're having any public in-person forums, but here at the Las Cruces channel, they've given us this opportunity, and I really like to say thank you to them, thank you to you, and I really wish you both a very good luck on your campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I want to just be able to sit there and say it's up to us as voters to go out and vote. We can see with the pandemic the impact it's had on our communities, on our schools, and how many people are getting involved and expressing themselves. Sometimes maybe not in the most respectful way, but at least they're getting out and having their voices heard. As we move forward, we will be having other candidates come to join us, and this is an opportunity for us and the viewing public out on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and on the Las Cruces channel to participate with us. I really would like to say I appreciate Mr. Cisneros, Leanne Kay, for your questions. We really appreciate it. I'd also like to say thank you very much to Ms. Bloomfield and Mr. Derek Pacheco. Thank you guys very much. If there's anything that you guys have to ask of these candidates before we sign off and say thank you, this is your opportunity.
I have just one question. Earlier you mentioned SAC and DAC. I am a parent representative both for Organ Mountain High School and East Picacho Elementary. I want to make sure that you're aware, and I'd love a response to this from both of you quickly. The level of parent involvement at the DAC level is essentially non-existent. We attend, but we have no opportunity to communicate what we are seeing or feeling. If you are elected, what can you do to ensure that what's happening at SAC, which is very important, is being communicated, received, and listened to by those at the DAC level?
Do you want me to go
Ms. Cort,
first?
sure.
Okay. I think that that's fabulous, and I attended that first DAC meeting where we basically learned, the educational blueprint, which was very informative. But I think that part of that DAC meeting should be that each representative from each of the schools stands and speaks and talks about the different issues in the school and create more of a conversation that way. It's the first DAC meeting I've ever attended, quite honestly. I went to all the SAC meetings, but I never went to the DAC meetings, and so it was interesting for me. And so that's one of the changes that I would definitely put in place, is that each school has a representative that relays what happens at the SAC, and then we can work together to make sure that we solve those problems. Great question, thank you.
Mr. Young.
The other thing that I see is being a pandemic in its own way is the fact that in many instances, communication is the key. And not only do we have to have the communication one time, it has to be reiterated over and over so that everyone understands what's going on at both levels. And without good communication and reinforcement, nothing's going to happen. In many cases, it goes in one ear and out the other, whether we're adults, students, or whatever. We need to have a constant ebb and flow between the two groups so that not only do you get the communication, but you get results from the communication.
All right. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to all you folks out there watching with us today. That's going to go ahead and conclude our candidates forum for today. I'd like to say thank you to the Southwest Organizing Project, one of our sponsors, the Mesilla Valley Transportation, and the Las Cruces channel. Have a good night. Thank you very much.